This is our big season preview. So we are waiting with bated breath the predictions, the analysis, the rundowns of both the Eastern and the Western Division. So, Chad, we'll start with you. Let's go out to the East, where, as Mike pointed out most eloquently just a couple weeks ago, there is a clear distinction between the top three and the bottom four, and how you see this thing playing out this fall.
Yeah, I agree with Mike 100% in that fashion. You look at Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, those are clearly your top three. Then you can start shuffling in whoever else at that point. With those bottom four, I would probably look at Kentucky as being one of the teams I think that can actually make some movement this year. And that's not saying a lot. That's just saying, with those four that you're looking at, with Vanderbilt, Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, I think that South Carolina ultimately is probably going to struggle a little bit with Muschamp. And, we know that their offense is really, really young for the most part. And so they've got a lot of experience over there. Vanderbilt, I think, could probably make some jumps. And look, in the Eastern Division, again, when I say make some jumps, this isn't like world breaking news or anything like that. These lower four teams are going to be slugging it out for placement. But I think when you get into the top three teams of Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, it's really going to come down to defense. I like that I like Tennessee, what they're bringing back on their roster. The addition of Shoop as a defensive coordinator, I think, is going to pay massive dividends for this team going forward. I think that's going to be something that we'll see immediately. Speaking of tomorrow night when they play App State, I look to see this defense kind of step up and show its teeth a little bit. I think that's going to be key. That and Dobbs. I want to see if Dobbs how his passing attack has transpired during the offseason. We know that Preston Williams is a guy that everybody's kind of looking at to possibly step up. They've got several wide receivers this year that could be key for them. So that's kind of an area I'm looking at to see. And if they can show that there's a passing attack beyond 10, 15 yards, and we're not talking about dinking and dunking on the field, and we actually can see something that's consistently downfield to create a threat to go along with two of the best running backs, I think, in the conference, which is Hurd and Kamara, I think you've got something there at Tennessee. And then you turn around and you look at Georgia and Florida. And Georgia, I think, is going to have some transition at first with the fact that they're going with a new offensive coordinator, and that's going to be an issue for them at first.
So, Mark, I'll pick up where Chad left off. Chad talked about the three categories of the SEC East, and I think he hit on that right. He also mentioned what I believe is the most important word, and that's transition. I think all 7 teams in the division are in a transitional period. We'll start at the top. I think Tennessee has the talent and the depth to win the division, just like most of the media is predicting. But it's a transitional year for Tennessee. If they're going to win the East, they've got the returning offense, they got the returning quarterback, and a lot of talent coming back on defense. If they're going to transition and make that leap back to conference title contenders, this is the year they have to do it. They'll lose a lot of talent to the NFL next year. Chad kind of went down the roster with Dobbs, Kamara, Hurd, that returning defense led by Cameron Sutton and Jalen Reeves-Maybin. If Tennessee's going to get back to where they want to be, this has to be the year where they transition from a mid-SEC team to a title contender. Georgia and Florida, I think, are going to compete for that second, third position and can also compete for the division title as well. Both very talented teams. But both of those programs are going through transitions well. Of course, the transition from the Richt to the Smart era at Georgia, also possibly the transition to the Jacob Eason era at Georgia as well. Florida, of course, they had their coaching change last year, but they welcome a new quarterback and hopefully a new offensive system. They want to maintain that momentum on defense. They've had good defenses for the past several years now. So Georgia and Florida are both in that transitional period, trying to stay up there, and they can still compete for the division title. And then when you look at those bottom 4 teams, Kentucky, Missouri, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, I agree with Chad. I think those are four teams down there, and all 4 of those teams are looking to transition out of that bottom 4 into the top 3. I think Kentucky has the best chance. I think Kentucky finishes 4th. If they don't make it to a bowl this year, you got to think this is Mark Stoops last year. Missouri, the transitional team, transitional program, transitional school. I oftentimes don't factor in non-field or non-program or non-team variables into a team's prediction. But the feeling in Columbia now at the entire school, the football team, the program, the school, that's just not a place that has a lot of positive vibes now. And I think that will affect the program and the team a little bit. And then, of course, Vanderbilt and South Carolina, they're going to try to transition back to the top. Don't think we're going to see a lot of there. Interesting about those bottom 4 teams, all 4 of those teams have out-of-conference games against top-notch opponents: Clemson, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and West Virginia. And that's not going to help those 4 teams try to move up the rankings any. So I think that's what you're going to see in the SEC East. I think it's all about transition from the top 3 and the bottom 4. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, you're starting I'll start at the bottom as well, since that's where you just left off, and I keep going back and forth. I was a little high on South Carolina, I'd say about a month ago, but then a lot of word came out of camp, and some people we know who end up who follow South Carolina are not as high after getting to see the team up close, and that's kind of changed my opinion a little bit. And plus, we've seen players leave through the last couple of weeks, and there's just still a lot of questions on how Muschamp is going to, change what he did at Florida with that offense. Is he going to get too involved and let that offense play in a box instead of opening up with offensive coordinator Kurt Roper? That's a big question. I think it's more of a wait-and-see approach for me if Will Muschamp can change his ways from what he did at Florida. Going back up, 6th place, I got Missouri. Barry Odom, he walks into a good situation as far as the defense goes. I still think they're going to, struggle with a work in progress offense. Drew Lock, can he build on the experience he got last year and can it was downright ugly at times, as a lot of SEC teams looked on offense toward the end of last season. But we know they got the defensive talent. Barry Odom's a specialty, and I really think they'll pick that up to I think the difference will be the reason I would put Mizzou over South Carolina is I think Missouri's defense will be just a hair better than that. Kentucky, not as high on as a lot of people are, but it's more to do with the SEC East being kind of weak. I got them in 5th place. Drew Barker comes in, looks promising there. But my big question is, why is the defense not being able to take that next step under Mark Stoops, being that's what he's known for? It's a question. They've gotten better recruiting since he's been there, but they just have been not able to break through that other echelon to now where we're picking Vanderbilt above Kentucky. So I'll go ahead and go to Vanderbilt. The reason I like Vanderbilt a little bit more is they seem confident in Kyle Shermer. Naming him starting quarterback before camp started. Zach Cunningham's a star on defense. Ralph Webb's one of the SEC's best running backs, in my opinion. You put him on a better team, I think he's a star, even bigger star. So, and Derek Mason seems to get it a little bit more. But I am ready to see them take the next step. Can they upset one of the big boys in Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia? At the moment, I don't see it. Yes, they were close at times last year. But it's I do question, and it starts early. South Carolina and Vanderbilt, those 2 teams, and 2 different coaching situations with Muschamp and Mason. One of those coaches need a big win there. Number 3, I do have Georgia. I do think it is a year of transition, like we have said for those guys. They're lost a lot of front 7 talent on that defense for Kirby Smart to come in, and I think make it Alabama-esque right away. I don't think he has the horses to do that just yet. And of course the Jacob Eason, Grayson Lambert rotation. How's that going to work out? Yes, I do agree. We'll probably see Jacob Eason sometime this year. Probably not start, but I think that's kind of what holds him back a little bit. They'll let him learn on the fly and get some experience going for next year. And of course the East, at the top of the East. Go back and forth with Florida and Tennessee. It's and just for the sake of arguing with Mike, and we can have some fun with it. I'll put Tennessee second. I'll put Florida first. We'll have some fun with it. I really do go back and forth. I think you can look at the winning streak Florida has over Tennessee, but you can look at what Tennessee brings back this year to finally end that streak. Games at home. But I'll be one of those stubborn guys and say I gotta see it to believe it. When Tennessee beats Florida, the streak has to end sometime. It's going to end sometime. It probably will be this year. But just for the sake of argument, I'll put Florida first, Tennessee second. Mike and I can have some fun with it. I'm ready to see that game. It's the SEC's most trash talk game, I think, this offseason when those teams get together. And it's going to be a bloodbath in Rocky Top. It's going to be a hostile environment. Can't wait for that game. But just for the sake of having some fun, I'll put Florida first, Tennessee second.
Okay, for the sake of argument, then, I'm taking Mizzou to win the East. No, no. So, yeah, we got a clear distinction in the top three and the bottom four. My thoughts about the bottom four, in line with what Mike had to say about Kentucky, I think that they are clearly the team that could break into the top three, or not necessarily into the top three, but be that fourth team, that team that reaches postseason play. The recruiting that Kentucky has brought in under Mark Stoops versus the other three isn't really comparable. Kentucky definitely has the best roster of the four teams. It's kind of alarming what's happened to South Carolina in just a few years. I'm going to be interested, while the rest of us are focusing on the elite teams playing out of conference games, you know, the big Alabama USC matchups and the rest of them, the SEC, for the really hardcore college football fan that's looking at all the games, can really distinguish itself, and I think typically does, because Mizzou, West Virginia. Mizzou is clearly one of the two or three worst teams in the SEC. Same with Vandy. They go out and they play teams that are, in Georgia Tech's case, probably the 8th or 9th or 10th seeded team out of 14 in the ACC, and Vandy could win that game. Mizzou could hang with West Virginia, possibly. Probably don't have the explosive offense that they need to hang in that game. But I'm just saying, look out for those games in regards to the SEC can lose them, and there's nothing hurt in terms of reputation in the SEC losing those games. But maybe they jump out and pull off a couple upsets from some of the underlings. Let's look at the top three. Okay, for Georgia and for me, what type of head coach is Kirby Smart? How is he going to place his stamp on this football team and on this program right out of the gate? What is going to distinguish him from Mark Richt, and how his football teams play on game day? We knew that Mark Richt's teams were going to win 10 games, but they didn't win when they had less or sometimes equal talent. Of course, the running back situation is stellar, but do those guys stay healthy? They're nicked up coming into the season. Of course, we're keeping our eye on quarterback, and Jacob Eason being the outlier or the risky selection of how they're going to play this year versus playing it safe with Grayson Lambert. I just think the defensive line in the front seven for Georgia isn't close to what it's been in the past. They're very young and very thin there compared to what they've been, and I think that's really going to hurt them despite what might be the best defensive backfield in the SEC. It's certainly one of the top five or so in college football at Georgia, with Mauger and with Sanders. Florida, the quarterback situation is an unknown for us at this point. The offensive line has got to get significantly better for them to beat Tennessee and to beat Georgia again, and the difficult games that they have to tackle, especially LSU out of the Western Division. And Florida also, I believe, has a date with Arkansas, so that's tough. The front seven's exceptional, but some thin and some concerns at linebacker, and David and I have talked about that in the past. And again, solid at secondary. Tennessee, though, this is the year for the Vols to break through, maybe not just in the SEC, but to break through and win the whole thing in the SEC to get to the college football playoff. I just think this roster has just come to fruition kind of all at the same time, and everything's in place for this team to do it, and I think they will do it, and Tennessee wins the Eastern Division. All right, I believe we've got 3 votes for Tennessee and 1 for Florida.